Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's one of these first warm days in March of 2017. I've been talking a lot lately. That's why my voice sounds so leathery. I've done this once before, a long time ago, on an episode. I think it's when I decided to do patience. So I thought I'd share with you the process, just open mic into my consciousness of sort of how I decide to do an episode. So I'm sitting here, I've set the stuff up, I push record. I have no fucking clue. I'd say 80% of the time I have a clue. And then 20% of the time, as I'm setting it up, I'll make a decision, or 2 minutes into sitting in this chair, I'll make a decision. Here's how I study my emotions to build an episode. I'm looking for tension. Mental tension, that if you were a marketing department trying to figure out what product to make, you're looking for a need. You know, Steve Jobs is great. He would just live life, and he would sense where he thought, well, shit, why doesn't that exist? I want this invention. I want it. Fuck all you guys. I'm just going to make it. And, of course, he's sharing the concepts, and he also eventually developed a staff that was made of so many A players. They did the same thing. So I sit here and I study my mind. I'm thinking, so here's the route I'm going today. I just had a real interesting conversation with a new person I met today. And she's a young girl, and she was just talking about how her friends are more spiritual. Her generation's more spiritual, which, man, it's such music to my ears. But she was talking about the unknown. You know, we talk about the unknown a lot on this show, and I got a whole episode dedicated to it. She said, I'm trying to become satiated with just not knowing. And I'm not trying to be ignorant, she said. I'm just trying to feel comfortable with that as a base starting point such that I could build into something. And then we got off on how that might be applied to real life, which was, she eventually mentioned, well, like we were talking about the show, and I said, well, you know, I do alien episodes too, and she goes, oh, that's the part that kind of freaks me out. And so I'm listening, and she says, you know, because I don't know what would happen if they showed up. You know, on this show, we've beat it to death of what would happen if they showed up. And I said, well, why is that alarming to you? And she goes, I think that I need to prepare personally if they were to show up. But she goes, I don't know if society's prepared. And I said, that's why we have deep thoughts. Just to make sure that a lot of us have had those conversations, right? Such that when the unexpected happens, or whatever's supposed to happen happens, there's a scaffolding of people who've had not only the conversation, but they've had a very deep conversation. Extremely important, right? So I don't know if I want to talk about aliens. I mean, I always want to talk about aliens. We got to get a subject. We got to get a theme. Something to have a beginning, a middle, and end. I'm watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine again. I'll tell you what's really sort of... It's not deeply disturbing or anything, but it's a little depressing to look at, you know, scenes from Deep Space Nine's intro where they're kind of panning around the space station. And, you know, when that came out 25 years ago, you would watch it and say, oh my gosh, yeah, that's exactly what space looks like, because I believe NASA. And today you're kind of like, well, can't see any stars in space, supposedly, because no pictures ever have any. The immutable Milky Way that could never be apertured out of a photograph is missing. Every goddamn star is missing from every photograph. Constantly. Just absurd, right? The place I've been putting my research in, in fact, sort of, I shouldn't say research, because research means that you wake up and you have an intent and you push into knowledge and you read and you digest and you interpret and all that stuff. I'm not really doing any of that in the deep thoughts realm other than just day-to-day living. But the stuff I keep bumping into, I am watching a ton of flat earth stuff. It's basically when I go to my cigar lounge, which we do cruise YouTube a lot. Again, like I've mentioned, there's some of you want me to do some of that darker stuff like Pizzagate. There was a suggestion to do an episode on Hinduism. I need to do more research. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to really hold it together on an episode. In terms of the self-help stuff, I've done a lot of those lately. What I might do is just make this sort of a freestyle episode. No one particular topic. We're just going to meander around. Because I think a lot of you have questions about, sort of my thought process for the next episode, what have you. Perhaps I can help you help me in figuring out what to do by sort of setting out the requirements. For me, I have to, I guess put it this way. I've always wanted to be sort of, I guess doing something that other people aren't doing. And it's not just to show off or something like that. It's really a matter of if someone else is carrying water, let's just say, they're providing that service, but no one is cooking, then I can add more value to society by cooking than I could by duplicating an effort of simply maybe speeding up the accumulation of water, right? I mean, there's 9,000 videos out there about flat Earth. So for me, I need to add something different to the discussion. And thankfully, flat Earth discussions are extremely linear and extremely, I don't know, in some cases just, some cases scientifically super imaginative, great guys like Brian Mullen getting involved. I love that guy. I just like his whole style. Because he builds up a case that he then demonstrates on a whiteboard. You don't have to agree with him, but you can't deny his methodology's clean as hell. I like that guy because he brings something unique, and he runs off in tangents that of his own, and he brings us more wisdom. Even if you're learning the foundation of the science that this guy brings to the table. That's pretty cool, right? So when I dive into something, it's either I think my observations are unique because they're me versus anyone else on the planet Earth, or I'm going to take it to a different level of continued analysis, right? I'm debating of jumping off that previous charter and jumping into a topic. One of the subjects I want to cover is meeting an alien. Meeting aliens. Because if I say, hey, let's have a discussion about meeting aliens, I think a lot of us think, well, shit, what's the big deal? Why the hell will we ever talk about meeting aliens for an hour? I think that's kind of funny. If you have that thought, it's kind of funny, right? I mean, it's just meeting aliens, I've often contemplated what would it be like if, but let's go through it, right? Shit, this might be the actual subject. Sorry, guys. Let's take it through a scenario. Every alien we've ever seen, besides Whitley Strieber, we've seen it on a movie screen, on our televisions, inside internet browsers, whatever. They've always been portrayed as only visiting during the nighttime hours because that's part of the fucking spooky equation of it all. But what if aliens really showed up? And let's say they're not humanoid. Let's say they're, beige, blue, gray, something. And they're not naked, like all the bullshit photographs you see. Got a little outfit on. Tailoring is phenomenal. Because, they've bred so much into their own gene pool that, there's just one size fits all. Can you imagine that? You don't have any sizes. You just go, I'll take design number 27. But this thing shows up. And let's just say summer day. All right? And you could pretty much pick whatever alien you want for this conversation, but what I'm going to pick is the one that's, say, 4 feet tall. We'll go with almond eyes. We'll go with the traditional Hollywood bulbous veiny head. And, very thin arms, sort of kind of look like an emaciated torso, but that's just their natural rockin' abs they've got. And you really stand face to face with this being. The sun is glistening off their skin. The subdermal layers to the skin are visible. The capillaries, whatever they've got for blood, it's visible. Blue, green, yellow, pumping, sort of urine color, whatever. Their eyes glisten. It's daytime, so maybe their eyelids are kind of squinted a little bit because it's starting to hurt their eyes. But unlike all of your imagination, unlike all of the Hollywood crap, they are real. They are moving. And they're right in front of you. Not like right up here to your face, but, they're within 3 feet of your body. And they're looking right at you. And there's an intense connection that you have, because if if eyes are the windows to the soul, then you're staring into the cavern, the galaxy that is their soul, given the size of their eyes, right? And they're not aggressive. They're not moving quickly. You get the sense they can. But they understand you're going to be potentially freaked out. They've had some time to think about it because they've been flying around in UFOs. However they get here. But you are standing here, a Homo sapien, a human, and you are looking at this creature, and you are going through a mental transformation that is, profound, to put it infinitely lightly, right? What has been a suspicion inside your mind has now been validated right in front of your eyes. They're real. They're really real. Part of your brain races to all of the images that have been in Hollywood, like Super Trooper Insectoid, mindless robot aliens, the Giger alien in Aliens, which has a little bit of intelligence, it would seem. And this thing in front of you is bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs, pretty much matches our genetics in terms of overall theme of architecture. It may or may not look like any of the photographs you've seen online. It definitely doesn't, completely match anything that you've seen. So now in your brain, you're doing that inventory. You're inside the pantry of your belief in aliens, and you're sorting through true, false maybes, all the subject matter about aliens. And you're pulling up the card, and you're holding it up to his face, and you're going, okay, I really can't tell whether or not I believe in how you drive your car. Oh, yeah, as far as insectoid mantis alien, well, you're not one of those. Well, maybe for now it's a big no. And you're going through that process at 1,000,000 thoughts per second. You are sensing things on a level that you can't even put into words, right? And for the time being, the alien is not pushing his thought process into yours. At least you assume it's a he. There's no bra. There's no eyelashes on the eyes. Now, there's a few physical things you need to recognize about how you would interpret such a thing. If the alien is shorter than you, you might feel more comfort in the fact that you have more body mass than he does. If there's only one of them in your eyesight, and there's no ship parked over to the side with potentially a whole bunch of these motherfuckers in there, then you're feeling safe. Like, I can take this guy down, can't I? If he starts getting crazy on me, you catch yourself in that thought, and you're like, oh my God, I hope he didn't hear that. I don't mean you any harm. You start beaming that at him. You're just like, I'm a little freaked out, man. Religion comes into your mind. And let's just take it from our perspective. The people that have heard a flat earth theory before, at least. Now all of a sudden, you're staring at an alien, and annoying people like me come into your memories, and you hear me say, Jesus Christ never existed. He never, ever existed. Yeah, all the apostles. They didn't exist. It's all bullshit. Adam and Eve never existed. It's all bullshit. That little voice comes in your head because you're staring right at an alien. You have to assume that if he got here, there's something he knows about space travel or interdimensional travel that you don't know. So you don't know if you should feel superior, humble, freaked out. Really quickly you go through those algorithms in your brain and you say, look, if he wanted to kill me, I guess I would be dead already. And then you may have that other thought process, which is like, oh my God, I hope this guy sticks around and lets me take a selfie with him. Because otherwise no one's going to believe me, and this is the most profound thing that's ever happened to me. Depending on how real the moment remains for you, whether or not he punches into your brain and starts creating a surreal moment, you may challenge your own perception of reality for that split second. And then something happens. Very slowly and very carefully, as an olive branch to our customs of how we greet each other, he slowly cranes up his right hand, organizes his fingers without a thumb to shake your hand. Perhaps, to the best of his ability, regardless if this is his custom or his native communication with his own muscles and his face, he attempts to smile. Just a tiny smile. And you're a little nervous, right? You're thinking, oh my God. His fingers look so small. His wrist is like as thick as an electric toothbrush. Maybe I'll hurt him. And then if I hurt him, is he going to be mad at me? Nah. You probably can read my mind, right? I mean, that's what they say, right? You're looking down at the slit that's his mouth, and you're thinking, that thing doesn't look like it's been used much. It doesn't even look like it's eaten anything ever. But as each second ticks by, he remains calm and collected, there's this subconscious security that you have in him, that he is in complete control of his faculties. And whether or not you consciously think this or subconsciously think this, you think perhaps if he's here today, this is the byproduct of potentially decades and decades, if not centuries, if not millennia of planning. And if it were truly to be as absurd as one little alien coming up to you, and not a bunch of them, in the daytime, then you might even think, damn, there must be something about me. Maybe he read my mind, and I've had personally so many conversations, I being you, that he trusts me. He knows that my reaction is going to be as clinical as possible, as rational as possible. And you slowly, when seeing his attempt to smile, you perhaps even get a feeling from him that he is smiling. Telepathically, you see the smile and feel the smile a lot more vivid than any use of muscles in his face. And like we all do when we're looking at someone else's face, sometimes we mock the way that they look. Like if they raise their eyebrows, you raise your eyebrows. If you smile, they smile. You really got to know that about human beings. If you want someone to feel something, be that person first and watch how they fall into line behind you. Meaning, if you want someone to be happy, you got to genuinely be happy yourself and exude it through expression. And you'll find that the other person starts to feel better already. But you start to kind of crack a smile too. Like, oh my God, this is happening. This is cool. And you know what? You look kind of wild, but man, I can kind of see why you people think you look good. That's how you procreate, right? And you slowly reach up your hand. And you grab his fingers. Maybe it's cold, maybe it's warm. They're very soft, they're very tender. And you realize that the handshake really is a matter of clasping Fingers around other fingers. You have an opposing thumb he doesn't have, but his fingers are long as hell. And you kind of have a flubby handshake. But what's more important is that you're communing, you're bonding, and you are telling the other person, the other being, I mean you no harm. And he's telling you the same thing. And so now you've established sort of a bar of how you're going to behave towards each other, right? Now, if you've seen The Twilight Zone: To Serve Man, you may have other suspicions inside yourself. Are you being duped? Is this the first play in a game that's going to end in the world? And for a second, you might have some fears. Maybe he senses your fears and sends a thought at you. Don't worry, you're fine. But in the end, even if you're able to isolate a thought for a split second there, you say to yourself, well, again, this dude wanted to do me harm. Seems to have the tech to get here. I don't have the tech to get to him. Hell, I don't even have the tech to find the guy in the universe. So you're probably safe. You're probably safe. Now let's change some parameters and see how things change. We'll speed it up a little bit here. All right. Well, let's do the first big change, which is that he's a lot bigger than you. Let's say he's 6 feet and you're 5'8". Or you're even shorter. He's got command of a lot of body mass. You know, he's a proportionate creature. Now, they've never been portrayed that way except for the beige. Well, there's two species that get portrayed that way that are non-human. Human being our face and our type of skin. There are the beige almond-eyed females, which are supposedly 7 feet tall but very lanky. But they're the ones in control. I heard they're kind of bossy too. And then there's the more recent emergence or reemergence of reptilian humanoids, which are definitely formidable. Scales for skin, basically exactly the fictional lizard that James T. Kirk fought out there in Apple Valley. It is very interesting they picked a reptilian, isn't it? Or at the Slee Stacks in Land of the Lost, sort of reptilian, coming from the bowels of the earth. Hoo-hoo, I just put that together. The Slee Stacks? What a fucking weird-ass name. But for now, this one's peaceful looking and bigger than you. I guess we could just analyze what would it be if it was a lanky female beige, which is sort of loosely portrayed at the finale of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Or what if it was a big-ass lizard person? You sort of assume that if something is formidable looking and threatening, that they're not going to sit there and shake your hand and be all cool, but maybe they could. Hell, maybe that's why they don't show up. They're like, fuck, you realize we look like fucking alligators to them. Yeah, I know. Doesn't that suck? Well, what the fuck are we going to do? I don't know. Should we wear costumes? Nah, eventually you have to take off the mask. And they're all going to freak out. They even made a show called V. These asshole producers in Hollywood made us look bad. Now, Star Trek has made several reptilian humanoids that were very friendly. Doctor Who has recently reprised some of their aliens that way. And they portray them as just standard good folk. But now, you're in your cul-de-sac or wherever you are, shaking this thing's hand during the daytime. Maybe you're in a park, whatever. Softball game. And there is now a bunch of them. They're showing up and they're sort of shaking everyone's hand. Or, even more terrifying, there's a bunch of them kind of grouped and they seem to be talking to each other. And they're talking to each other and they're looking over at you and then talking and looking over at you. And the way that they're doing it, the rhythm and speed at which they're doing it is indicative of how humans get really suspicious of other people. Do you have what it takes to hold it together? I'm going to tell you, you won't know until it happens, and I don't give a shit what you think. Unless they have the ability, which has been claimed on several encounters, unless they have the ability to sort of maybe control your adrenaline flow, meaning keeping it very low, perhaps increasing your dopamine and then charging it to be a positive, warm feeling. Unless they have that biological ability, you won't know until you know. And how could you possibly experience something here on Earth that would prepare you for such a thing? Good question, right? Some of you might get creative and say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to pick an alien design. We're going to make an alien costume. We're going to get someone who's pretty much that size, whether it be a kid or someone who's just nice and short. We'll put them inside. We'll meditate for a little while to believe what we're about to see, and we dramatize up this entire encounter using a facsimile of an alien, just to see if even for a fleeting moment we can believe this role-playing exercise. Will that allow us to tap into our subconscious for a split second at a much deeper, realistic level and find out if we would panic or not? Or whether or not we can reveal something about ourselves that is more noble than panicking. I wanted to narrate this at a very slow pace so that we don't just walk by the concept in our mind, right? Because how many people, when you have that conversation of, if you said, what would you do if you met an alien? And someone just knee-jerks, hi, man, I go up and say hi, man, it'd be so cool. Sure you would. Maybe drunk. And maybe it's this flippantness that we have towards it, or even the fear, founded or unfounded, that keeps them away. I shared my one encounter with an alien. Some of you guys are like, what? If you haven't seen all the episodes. So I don't know if this was, it easily could be explained by non-encounter situations, but there's a few elements that are actually kind of interesting. And, just to retell the story very quickly, I was 21 years old, living in a beach house in Oxnard, California, with my girlfriend. Her and I were reading Whitley Strieber's book Communion to each other. And again, my encounter with that book was very weird, and I think Whitley at best has had one abduction experience and then couldn't deal with the fact it never happened again, so he kept saying it happened, or he figured out a gimmick to talk about it. He talks about abductions just like you might talk about going to get a gallon of milk. But it's Christmas time, and, I have an August birthday, so my girlfriend she's from New York, so she flew to New York around my birthday just before and picked up a bunch of really specialized vinyl records and brought them back to me. And I had no idea what I was looking at my birthday cycle, but, flat squares. And they were Prince records that I still have them. They're ultra valuable. And so she set this precedence: I give you albums. So it's Christmas time. She had come back. She had just gone to New York and flew back in by the 23rd. And we had some presents. And there's more flat squares. And I looked at him, and I thought, oh, cool, man. She went to New York and got me some more records. This is going to be awesome. Because New York City's got everything, right? Not that L.A. didn't, but we were living in Oxnard, so we didn't go to L.A. that often. But we're reading this book, and it's getting towards the last probably 30 pages where it starts getting a little freaky because he's starting to have really interesting experiences with these folks where he's unable to control time. He's not being abducted necessarily, but he's having his life controlled by them, and they're sort of stalking him. And again, he's a thrill writer, so it makes total sense that his book goes in that direction. Oh, I meant to finish. So when I found the book, I was at I think B. Dalton Books, which I don't think exists anymore. And it was in this bargain bin next to the cash register. And I was already buying something else. And I look down and I see the front cover of that book. And it's an almond-eyed alien with a more flat head, a more triangular skull. Not this big brain cavity with veins on it, which every time I'd seen that as a child, I was always very angry at that design for some weird reason. What the hell do I give a shit, right? But I saw that face and I thought, my feeling was just this unbelievable identification with that rendering, that artist rendering on the cover. And my brain just basically had this spiritual pressure lift off where I said, that's what they look like. That's it. No one's ever drawn it like that. That's what they look like. I'm buying this book. I have no idea what the hell this book's about. And I didn't put together that Whitley Strieber had written, what was it, Cat People or whatever it was, a movie my father loves, which I didn't have the maturity to appreciate it at the time. Haven't seen it since. But I get the book home and we're reading it. And so, inside the book's his entire story of being abducted for the first time in upstate New York several times. Then, of course, he has this story that goes back to his childhood. So I go to bed that night, having seen these presents, did not touch them, saw them, was very sure of myself as to what they were. Her and I had just moved in together. Just moved in together. And we're reading the book out loud to each other. And I woke up, and the Christmas tree at the time was an amplifier for various musical instruments, but not guitars, more like keyboard. It's a shitty little amplifier. And I woke up sitting on it. And the presents are now between the thing I'm sitting on and my legs, my back of my calves, right? And I'm staring straight at a gray almond-eyed alien. And it's sort of it's the natural kind of light in the room. No lights are on except over to my left in the beach house is a big giant window. We're on the first floor of a 3-story building. The owner owns, inhabited the first 2 floors. And this volumetric light's coming in the room, and we had a puzzle on a wooden table over there, and these aliens there's a bunch of them over there, zipping by really fast. They stop, and they look like they were maybe looking at the puzzle, building the puzzle, hell if I know. And then one of them would zip by. It's really strange. Sort of like he's taking inventory of the whole room. And this alien's looking right at me, and he goes, are you going to be okay? And he put his little hand on my shoulder, my left shoulder. And I'm looking at him, and I've sort of just woke up in the middle of this conversation that has been, I guess, going for a while. And I looked at him, and I'm kind of melancholy. I'm like whiny. And I said, I guess, and then he just keeps looking at me. And then I said, well, no one's going to believe me. And he said, well, what would make them believe you? I said, I don't know. And he reaches down between my legs, grabs one of these flat, square presents, which I thought was an LP, holds it in my face, and he goes, if I told you what was in this present, would they believe you? I remember looking at it and thinking, well, it's a fucking record, man. I already know what's in that one. That's not a big deal. And I said, I guess. And he goes, it's origami paper. And I was like, whoa, that's the weirdest gift ever. And that's the last thing I remember until I closed my eyes. And now I'm on the side of my bed. I went to say we were sleeping in a single bed, like a twin bed, 2 grown people. So we're back to back in bed at night. But I wake up, and I'm looking at the clock, and it's 1200. On the button. Clocks are all relative in people's homes back in those days. And I hear her washing dishes out front. It's obviously broad daylight. I get up. I go out front. I sit down in front of these gifts. And I'm looking right at it. It looks just like a record. It's the same size as like a 7-inch extended single thing, right? And I touch it, and it's soft. And I think, holy shit. And I look at her. She's washing a pan out. And I said, look, I had a weird dream last night that an alien, again, we're reading this book to each other, so it's in our lexicon. I said, this alien told me what was in this present. She says, oh, yeah? She's smirking. I said, he told me it was origami paper. And she stops washing the dish. She looks at me and she says, "We better not tell you what's in your big gift." It was origami paper. I promise you, I've never seen origami paper in my life. I didn't know it was square. I thought it would be 8 by 11. I had no idea when it opened it up finally for Christmas that one side's got color and the other side's white. And the idea is you need to fold it perfectly such that the inside's on the inside and the outside's on the outside. As if the shit wasn't difficult enough to fold. But now here's the thing. That could have been just as easily her and I reading each other's minds, using the book as a mechanism to realize the information transfer. She's thinking about, oh my God, he's never going to guess that gift. I'm back to back with her. There's plenty of tests that say that, human beings that are touching communicate telepathically, especially over extended periods of time. What if both of us are in REM sleep? What if both of us are in delta? Maybe the transfer is just unbelievable. So there's plenty of reasons that it could be absolutely a fictitious realization and not a real alien encounter. That's why I don't push it. To my knowledge, I've had no other encounters of any kind like that. But the reason why I recap that story to you, and I apologize to listeners that had to hear it 2 or 3 times in other episodes, is that wasn't vivid. I mean, it was vivid, but it was dark. I swear to God, I felt him touch my shoulder. I don't get a sense of touch that much inside dreams. No one ever has ever come up to me in a dream and tapped me on the shoulder and I turn around. That's never happened. Now, I did see him. I didn't use my arms. I have a sense that I could feel the presence against the back of my calves, which would be atypical of a dream, because dreams, you don't, like one of our listeners said, he goes, I don't remember ever feeling my legs. I had a dream of a lion taking a chunk out of my leg with his paw in grade school, like first grade or something. But I didn't feel it. I was just freaked out. My leg got hurt. But let's step back from it for 1 second on a strategic level. What did humans used to do when they used to take over land from people in war? We did ground invasions, right? Our village gets too big, we go over and take over the other one. And we fight with spears and clubs and rocks and kung fu maybe. But it was always man on man war. And then how did we advance out of that? Well, we started shooting artillery, trebuchets, and eventually cannons. And then it got to air superiority. And now air superiority has gone through damn near a century of evolution. In fact, it has gone through a century of evolution from the Red Baron 100 years ago to Tomahawk missiles that could put right on your backyard, to laser-guided missiles and Tomahawks that you can watch the guy's face go, oh shit, right before he dies. So if an alien is right there in your face at any point in time, they're probably not coming to invade Earth and take it away from us. Unless they're just barbaric reptilians that want to take casualties when they don't have to. Probably one of the only disservices that science fiction movies portray are these barbaric aliens that have, the intellectual capacity to create starships, but don't have the intellectual capacity to not war and kill and create suffering. I mean, the latest debacle of Star Trek film making suggested the opposite, right? That these sort of weird, reptilian kind of bizarre beings just, they believe that war keeps you on your toes, basically, and that you'll get weak if you don't war. Whatever. But if they were ever here, there probably isn't a global invasion, but I know some of you are thinking, and I did a whole episode on the subject matter, so I'll try not to repeat it. We'll just say it in a single sentence. The notion is, well, they could abduct you. If you believe that's the case, then please go watch the alien abduction video episode. But now let's take a step back and ask a question that's never asked. Aside from Planet X, enslaving mankind to mine gold to put in the dust of Nibiru to, put in the atmosphere to save Nibiru people, that kind of craziness. Or alien abduction, where somehow there's this amazing amount of empirical data in your asshole that all the aliens need to get out of you through probing. Aside from those fear-mongering, lowbrow, low IQ, Whitley Strieber story arcs, let's ask a real basic question, shall we? What does an alien really gain by making contact with mankind? Tell me. Tell me one fucking thing that they need from us. One thing. When you really think about it, nothing. They don't need us. They don't need us for anything. What, are they going to have a real stimulating intellectual conversation? Nah. I don't think so. I don't think so. Do they need us to mine something out of the planet for them? Please. Please. If you have interstellar capability or interdimensional capability, then you have a grasp of fusion. And once you have a grasp of fusion, you can take any atomic mass in the universe, regardless of what your theories are, of what holds it together and what it really is, and you could turn it into anything that you want because you probably have an infinite power supply on top of that. But who would think that aliens need anything from mankind? Man's hubris. Man's ego. We are so deluded in our specialness to ourselves. And we've written so many fictional novels about how man could travel around the universe. Gene Roddenberry probably being one of the only true science fiction creators who leaves a little humbleness to the Romulans and the Vulcans and other races. They drive by and they find Earth. And if anything, they may just want to put it in the archives of what's actually gone on here. Would they need to meet mankind in this day and age? Nah. You want to know our various languages? Well, get yourself out a radio frequency receiver and listen. Hell, we have so many, translation programs from Rosetta Stone to the real Rosetta Stone that they could figure out how to speak all of our languages. So once you have that decoded, and if they read consciousness, what the hell do they need our language for? But they could find out our intent, the spectrum of our belief systems. They could watch our movies. They could listen to our jokes, whatever. Where is there a gigantic void that we can fill by meeting them? Unless they just simply have morbid curiosity. There really isn't anything we have for them. Now, I'm going to go where some of you might be thinking. One of the big story arcs that happens with alien contact is rooted to man's discovery of nuclear weapons. All right. Let's parse that for 1 second. The notion is that we've invented nuclear weapons and they are so incredibly powerful. Hubris, put it right here. That somehow we could blow up the entire universe. Maybe it's the Hadron Collider that has them worried. But when man was very small and nuclear bombs were very big and unknown, you realize when the first atomic bomb blew up, if that even happened, and it wasn't just a silo, a TNT, we weren't teaching nuclear physics in grade schools and middle schools. You had to go to a university to even start touching that science. So it was terrifying. I don't even know what it would be like to be sitting around a table in 1945 trying to discuss what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What? How big was the bomb? How many people got killed? It leveled a whole city? Holy Jesus. That's some terrifying stuff, right? It just got worse. And at least in the mind's eye of the people, there was hydrogen bombs from the Ruskies. But the notion is that sort of explosion sent a wave of energy, set off a little monitor somewhere in the alien intergalactic empire. Some little red light went on, and aliens went, "Oh my God, we have one. Let's go visit them. Let's turn all these things off." Now, let's look at this for a second. Some of you are gonna roll your eyes. Some are gonna go, "Yeah." The only way that makes any sense to me is if we're in a firmament dome that was built by these aliens, and they're gonna fuck up the dome. We need to get them to stop this shit. But it never stopped, right? They came down in Roswell a couple of years later. I guess it would be, 2 years later in 47. They took 2 years to get here for some reason. Somehow they could feel it 2 years away, however fast their ships go, and they're here. But we kept above ground testing until 1973. That's a long time, people. It's about 25 years of testing. Okay. So they didn't stop us. But let's think about, a meteorite hitting a planet, hitting a moon. Jupiter swallowing up 3 giant bodies. One, or at least 2 of them were the size of Earth or bigger. Shit happens, man. Well, how do you sense a nuclear bomb versus just a big-ass impact, right? Let's say we were to test a 100 megaton bomb, which I don't believe we've ever have. I mean, that would just destroy, most of Hawaii. It's such a massive bomb, right? And then let's take the average giant impact it makes a crater on the moon. Which one's bigger? How much energy is dispersed into the universe? And then how many of those are happening constantly? If it's true, what all these space agencies say about space, if we're not inside a firmament dome, they'd be happening so infinitely and so constantly in space that our little tiny tic-tac of a bomb ain't going to do shit. It's not going to set off any alarm. Are you kidding me? And I find it hard to believe that they've mapped the entire universe of all intelligent life and put little sensors in our atmosphere, little black night satellites to test this kind of stuff. Unless, again, Earth was created by them. Heliocentric ball and all. I'll give you a weird analogy for you to take home and put in your pipe when it comes to meeting aliens. Let me ask you, how many of you have owned a McLaren, a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, top of the line Ferrari, these collector's edition cars? How many of you have owned one of them? How many of you have owned a dozen of them, 24 of them? I can tell you, I know plenty of people who have, all the above cars you could possibly imagine. And eventually it gets old, and it gets old pretty damn fast. So when you get access to these vehicles and you drive them a lot, it's not that they're not amazing vehicles and that you don't feel kind of special for the first few minutes, but after a few years, you get tired of $5,000 oil changes, $10,000 car or tire changes. Sometimes you just get tired of people looking at you. You're like, "Oh, I'm making people feel bad because I'm driving this really amazing car." You may just go get that normal car. Most of my friends end up with really normal cars. Maybe they keep one tucked away, but they keep the door shut on the garage. Why tell you that analogy? Well, there's a lot of planets in the universe, right? Let's just keep going with heliocentric for a second. How many countrysides can you fly over? Mountainscapes can you fly over? Oceans you can fly over? Cities, towns, villages, roads that you could fly over where it still remains interesting to you? If you have command over traveling the entire universe, I'm thinking, just got a hunch, that it ain't going to be that special after a while. If you were to go through the school programs of perhaps aliens and maybe the younger folks pick a planet and they do book reports on us, who knows? Are we really doing anything special as a society? If we're truly just these insignificant dots on insignificant dots, are we doing anything that the rest of the universe doesn't do that needs to be studied? Could someone actually come up with a PhD thesis that's special about Earthlings versus Alpha Centaurians? Maybe. Be parsing the minutia of the existence of creatures, wouldn't it? Maybe they're trying to figure out why humans drink tea. Based on these just simple deductions, which I think are indisputably true, the only thing that makes sense to me is that either we're a heliocentric ball that's been built with a very special purpose, which I can't put my finger on. Perhaps we're a creation that is way beyond their capabilities, that even though they have superior technology to create us, it's like, the deep thought computer from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy creating the planet Earth to calculate a bigger concept than even he was able to create. Maybe something like that. Maybe. If it's a firmament dome, there's all kinds of stuff you could turn on. But if you're a firmament dome, a lot of you folks go with religion and God. And then a whole new batch of things that don't make sense start to get into the equation, which we're going to avoid here. But there wouldn't be any purpose for aliens if God himself has created this and Jesus was real and all the other religions were wrong and there's water above and water below and all this kind of stuff. If aliens created a dome like a Truman Show, yeah, but there'd be some very focused purpose, right? I thought of an interesting storyline of, what if the firmament dome exists, we are from a planet, our planet was in some kind of incredible peril, and aliens really have this sort of, adopt a pet theory, just like we do in the world today, because veterinarians make tons of money from it, right? But they adopt us off our planet, and to keep us oriented to where we came from, they created this dome, and they created this flat disc to mimic the round Earth that we used to be on. And they're just keeping us in the petri dish. It's exactly, square foot for square foot, the same size as our planet used to be. No, they don't mean any harm. They're just making sure we didn't get destroyed. And by putting this dome overhead and painting our stars the way they existed wherever we were in space, they're just putting us in a petri dish, literally, to save our ass, right? If you watch Twilight Zones, there's another little turn in there too, which is, what if we were in a zoo? There's an episode where these guys go to Mars, and the gentleman that played Cornelius in Planet of the Apes played this scientist that ends up getting to the other side. And all of his shipmates don't survive the accident. He's rescued. They promise him he's going to have everything he needs, and they give him this beautiful apartment that's modeled after his thoughts and his mind. Feels very comfortable, but he has no companions. And as soon as he tries to escape, he can't, and then he opens up the curtains to the front, and there's bars, and everyone's looking at him, and he's inside a zoo now. Maybe. So give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts on this. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Can you think of a reason why an alien really, really needs the intellectual capacity and achievement of mankind that they wouldn't have already usurped from their own experiences? Perhaps some other races. Are we just the first ones in line and they've never made contact with another being and we're the first? That could be. But there has to be a value. When you go to investors to invest in your company, there has to be a value that's second to second. In fact, they really want the value to go up and up and up and up, to innovate the next generation of whatever the hell you're doing. Stagnation is not a business model in most cases, unless you're making Q-tips and it's just a strategic resource of ear cleaning, right? Food for thought. Food for thought. So this turned out to be meeting aliens. I won't do this again in terms of keeping the book open at the very beginning. But you see how that just metabolized into this subject matter. We can spend an hour on it. We can have some epiphanies together, right? As I always say, I think you feel me. If you dig the series, please subscribe. If you like the episode, please give me a thumbs up. Comments, always welcome. DeepThoughtsRadio.com for all the feeds. I'm going to keep these bumpers really short for a while. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for making it to the end. You are superstars. Appreciate it. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.